Hello, sleepy dreamer. How you doing? Tonight I'll be your guide, here to ease you into calm, restful sleep. Before we get started, remember to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss future scary bedtime stories. Share in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Also, let me know if there's a story you'd love to hear next. When I was 17, a routine school excursion shifted the way I saw everything. At the time, I was still piecing together who I was, living in a small English town named Brindleford. It wasn't the quaint, picturesque sort you'd find on postcards, but rather the kind of place where life crawled on uneventfully until it didn't. I was in year 11 at Redwell Secondary, a school known more for its peeling paint and weary substitute teachers than for any sense of prestige. The buzz started when permission slips went out for our GCSE history trip abroad. The schedule listed Belgium, World War battlefields, memorials, and museums. Our history teacher, Mr. Havner, a wiry, quick-speaking man in his 40s, looked like he was the most eager of all. He kept insisting it was a chance to step directly into history's pages. To be honest, I couldn't care less about that. All I wanted was to get out of town, even if only for 5 days. There were 18 of us, plus Mr. Havner and Miss Caro, our English teacher recruited as the second chaperone. Hardly anyone slept the night before we left. By the time we made it to Belgium, drained from the ferry crossing and desperate to crash somewhere, none of us cared where we stayed. That's when things went sideways. The coach turned off the motorway, winding down a rural road that led to a place called Dremswick, a little farming village that wasn't on the itinerary. At first I didn't think much of it. Then we stopped at a gravel driveway before a 2-story building smothered in ivy and green mold. The sign above the entrance read, House Dreven Grey Inn, though half the letters had already fallen away. This is it, someone muttered behind me. Temporary stop, said Mr. Havner, clapping his hands. The original hotel had a plumbing problem. This was the only local alternative. My friend Nira tugged her hoodie tighter and whispered, looks like something from a horror flick. We shuffled off the bus, caught between fatigue and unease. The air was colder than expected. Gravel crunched as we dragged our bags over the cracked steps. The front door creaked open before anyone even touched it. That should have warned us. Inside, the air smelled of damp ash and paper. The lobby looked frozen in time. Faded carpet, sagging ceilings, mismatched antique furniture. A brass chandelier swung lazily, though no draft stirred it. From behind the desk emerged a man with sallow skin and deep-set eyes that barely blinked. Bienvenue, he said, his French accent deliberate and heavy. You are the students. I am Marcel. Please do not use the cellar. It is under repairs. Sure, said Mr. Havner awkwardly. We won't wander. Marcel handed us iron keys with oversized tags before turning silently away. We were divided into pairs or trios across 2 upper floors. My assigned room was number 27, at the top floor, shared with Nira and Tom. The hall leading up flickered dimly, the bulbs sputtering like gas lamps. I remember thinking it resembled the kind of place guests checked into but never returned from. The room was cramped, crooked beds, peeling floral wallpaper, thick dust over the windowsills. Outside stretched a lifeless, empty field. This place gives asthma just by looking, Tom said, collapsing onto the bed, his laugh oddly hollow. Nira didn't reply. She stood fixated on the wardrobe mirror. I followed her gaze, and for an instant I swore I saw movement behind us in the reflection, a blurred figure. But when I turned, nothing was there. Did you? I started. No, she cut me off quickly. Don't. That evening, after a bland meal of boiled potatoes and rubbery meat in the inn's dining hall, most of us crowded into one room to stream a film on someone's hotspot. Mr. Havner checked in before going downstairs to speak with Marcel about the next day. Miss Caro had already excused herself, complaining of a headache. We were halfway through the movie when it began. The lights flickered. Then came the sound of furniture being dragged across the floor above us, except we were on the top floor. Pipes, someone whispered, though their voice trembled. Then the knocking started, steady and deliberate from inside the wardrobe. I froze the movie. The sound stopped. You're joking, Nira whispered. Someone's messing with us. Tom yanked the wardrobe open. Empty. Nervous laughter broke out, but none of us slept easily that night. I woke again and again to whispers, low, rasping like voices inside the walls. At one point, I thought I saw a crouched figure in the far corner, but when I lifted my phone's flashlight, it was gone. By morning, Leah, one of the girls, was missing. Her bed untouched, her bag by the door. The teachers assumed she'd wandered off and lost her way. Marcel swore he hadn't seen her. We searched the fields, nearby lanes, even behind the inn. Nothing. The police were called, but they seemed indifferent. She likely ran away, one officer shrugged. We knew Leah. She wouldn't vanish without her phone or shoes, especially not here, in the middle of the night. That night, the whispers came again, clearer, louder. They repeated one word over and over. Below. All of us heard it. At 2:11 a.m., the fire alarm blared. We rushed outside in the freezing air, but no smoke or flames appeared. The alarm cut off abruptly. Marcel never emerged. Neither did Miss Caro. Mr. Havner tried to steady us, though his pale face kept turning toward the building. That's when we realized Nira was gone. I found her in the cellar. The door hung slightly open. My flashlight barely pierced the darkness as I crept down. She stood at the bottom, stiff, fists clenched, eyes wide. "Nira," I whispered. She turned slowly, pupils blown wide, mouth stretched open as if she had been screaming. Behind her, something stirred in the shadows. I didn't wait. I grabbed her arm and dragged her upstairs. She didn't resist. When we emerged, Mr. Havner's face was ashen. "We're leaving, now." We packed in silence, no one objecting. At dawn, we left House Dravengray. The sun spread a pale gold over the fields, but the inn remained dark. Nobody came to see us off. Leah was never found. The police claimed there was no record she'd ever stayed there, no evidence she'd even traveled with us. Her parents accused us of lying. Nira never spoke about the cellar. Weeks later, she transferred schools. As for me, that place still haunts my sleep. The whispers, the biting cold, and sometimes I glimpse Leah on buses and mirrors at crowded stops. She never looks older. I don't know what dwelled in that inn, but I know it watched us, chose us, and I know we were never meant to escape. I once thought overnight shifts meant fewer problems, less noise, and little more than me with my thoughts. But problems find their way in when no one's looking, especially in places most folks prefer forgotten. My name is Daniel Creer. At the time, I was 26, still raw from a breakup that had wrecked me in ways I hadn't believed possible. I had just relocated to Cedar Hollow, a quiet town in northern Wisconsin that most travelers only passed through. I went because some relatives lived 2 counties away, but I didn't want family close enough for constant check-ins. I needed distance. After weeks of either oversleeping or not resting at all, I knew I had to keep busy. Something simple, numbing, a job that covered rent and gave me the sense of a schedule again. That's how I landed the overnight desk job at the Pinecrest Motor Inn. It wasn't even on the internet. I spotted a flyer pinned to a laundromat corkboard, the paper browned and curling. Night clerk needed. Cash pay. Quiet work. Apply in person. It belonged to a wiry man named Walter Hames, maybe late 60s, moving like someone worn down by years. He didn't ask about my background and I didn't press for details. I showed up, and he handed me a jangling keyring along with the shift. "You're a quiet one," he said, smirking like it was some private joke. "That's good. This place doesn't need more noise." And that was that. I began the next evening, midnight to 8 a.m., every night of the week. I figured I'd last a month, maybe 2. I lasted 12 days. Pinecrest sat at the edge of town just past Route 7, where the lamps ended and the woods spread wide. The building stretched in an L shape with 12 rooms facing the lot. Most nights only 4 or 5 were taken, usually by truck drivers, contractors, or nameless drifters who vanished before sunrise. The office was no bigger than a storage closet with a scarred counter, a squeaky fan, and a faded sign nailed behind the desk. Absolutely no refunds. There was a thin cot in the back, where Walter said I could nap if things were dead. They usually were. Hours passed with nothing but moths tapping the glass, the TV murmuring silently, or me flipping through old magazines. I kept the front light burning and the door locked, not out of fear, but because it felt right. By the 4th night, I started recognizing the usuals. A trucker named Vince always asked for room 3 and left a 20 on the counter. A woman in her 40s named Carla checked in every Friday and stayed until Sunday. Her face always looked swollen, like she'd cried most of the drive. And then there was room 8. Walter told me never to rent it. Plumbing's busted, he claimed. Flood's bad. But the strange part was, the key to room 8 wasn't even on my ring. The first night that went sideways was August 11th. I recall because a storm was rolling in, and the air hung heavy, the sky undecided about breaking. Only 2 rooms were filled, Vince in 3, and a couple in 5. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard knocking. Not on the office door, on room 8. I pushed up from the chair and leaned toward the window. The lot was nearly empty. Rain began to tap the glass sharp and fast. Then another knock. Louder. 4 steady beats. I stepped into the rain, shirt soaked almost instantly, and walked toward room 8. No one stood at the door. I turned to scan the lot, still empty, but I swore the curtain moved in that window. Back at the office, the TV was off, though I hadn't touched it, and on the counter sat a silver key with 8 etched across the top. I didn't mention it to Walter. I wanted to, but something in me resisted. I slipped it in my jacket pocket, carrying it for 3 nights. Then, on August 14th, around 3:15 a.m., headlights swept the lot. A beat-up white Buick with mud-caked tires and one headlight gone. Out stepped a tall, thin man in a dark coat with the hood up, though it was 70 degrees. He didn't come near me. He walked straight to room 8 and unlocked the door. By the time I made it outside, the door had shut. I stood there too long, debating a knock. I didn't. I circled the rooms instead, looking for signs anyone else had noticed. Vince's blinds were sealed shut. The couple in 5 were gone. I hadn't seen them leave. I went back to the office and stayed upright until daylight came. August 15th was my last night there. Walter came in early, pushing open the front door just as I was leaving. "You look like hell," he muttered. "Didn't sleep?" "No," I said flat. His eyes locked on the key in my palm. "Where'd you find that?" His tone was sharp. I tried to play it casual. "Desk drawer." His stare tightened. "You didn't go in there, did you?" "In where?" "Room 8. "No," I lied. Walter studied me for too long before saying something I still remember. "If you ever see someone going in or out of 8, call me right away, no matter the time." "Why?" I asked. He only shook his head and walked away. That night I carried a thermos of coffee and a flashlight. My gut screamed something was coming. At 2:58 a.m. the Buick returned. Same headlight missing, same man. But this time, he wasn't alone. Another figure climbed out of the back seat, younger, mid-20s, hoodie pulled up, face marked with bruises. They went to room 8. The tall man unlocked it. The younger one wavered, resisting, until the older man grabbed his neck and shoved him inside. The door slammed. I stayed frozen. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Then I heard muffled screaming, frantic and desperate, like someone trying to stay quiet but failing. I called Walter. No answer. I called again. Nothing. So I grabbed the flashlight and stepped out. Rain had returned, light but enough to slick the pavement. I reached the door and pressed my ear against it. Silence. Then a thud. Another. Then nothing. My hand twisted the knob. It opened. The room was black, stinking of damp smoke and something metallic. I raised the flashlight with shaking hands. The bed was undone, sheets stained with something dark. In the corner slumped the younger man, eyes wide, mouth frozen, breath gone. Before I could move, footsteps came from behind. I turned. The tall man stood in the doorway, blocking my exit. He only stared, then grinned. I threw myself at him with all I had, knocking him into the wall. I bolted, sprinted across the lot, dove into my car, and tore out, gravel spraying. I didn't stop until the next town. I parked in a gas station lot until daylight, then called police and told them everything. They found the body, along with another buried behind the inn. Turns out Walter had history. Years earlier, he'd been investigated for shady rentals and trafficking, but slipped free for lack of proof. This time there was enough. He was arrested 2 days later, as was the man from room 8. Neither spoke during the trial. The Pinecrest Motor Inn was condemned and eventually demolished. Still, sometimes I dream of the screams, of that cold key in my hand. I don't work nights anymore, and I never drive back roads again. I once worked overnight shifts at a small roadside lodge just outside of Fairview, Virginia. It was the type of spot you'd miss if you weren't paying attention, squeezed between an abandoned cafe and a fading service station, resting just off a poorly lit highway mostly used by long-haul drivers or lost travelers who had taken the wrong exit. My name is Mai Nguyen, though around town most called me May. I had arrived in America from Vietnam in 1991 after spending a grueling year in a refugee camp in Malaysia. I was only 21 when I landed in Richmond, barely able to form a sentence in English, carrying nothing but a folded paper with my uncle's address and a borrowed jacket too thin for winter. By the time I was 25, I had managed to rent a studio above a laundromat and lived on my own. I sent money back home each month, so I accepted any job offered to me. The lodge position paid little, but it was consistent. After what I had been through, I learned not to complain. The place was 2 stories tall, with 26 rooms and a broken neon sign buzzing Maple Grove Inn. The front desk was managed by Frank, a broad man in his 50s who chain-smoked menthols and didn't pay much attention to guests. He liked me though, said I was quiet and dependable. He'd leave a stack of assignments in my slot, and I'd clean from noon until evening unless someone delayed checkout, which didn't happen often. But during one week in late October 1997, something unsettling began. A man checked into room 207, the only unit facing the forest behind the property. He arrived just as the sun dipped low, driving a black Lincoln Town car. I remember because the glare from his headlights startled me as I finished tidying up room 205. When I peeked through the curtain, I noticed him standing still beside the car, staring up at the lodge. He wore a long ash-gray coat, gloves despite the warm weather, and a black hat that seemed out of place. He moved at a measured pace, like someone with no need to hurry. When he reached the counter, I heard Frank mutter under his breath. "Name?" he asked flatly. "Madison," the man replied, his voice calm but deliberate, almost like it was rehearsed as he slid over a credit card. Frank glanced at it, squinted, shrugged, and ran it through. No identification was asked for. This was the late 90s, no cameras, no strict checks, nothing. "One night?" Frank questioned. "Perhaps longer. I'll let you know," the man said. He carried nothing, no suitcase, no bag, not even a briefcase. He simply walked upstairs and disappeared into room 207. The following morning, around 11 a.m., I tapped gently on the door for routine cleaning. No response. I knocked again. Still nothing. I assumed he had gone out, but the do not disturb sign hung on the knob, and rules meant I couldn't enter. By the third day it was the same. No request for service, no word from him, yet I knew someone was inside. A dim yellow glow seeped from beneath the door all night long. Once, when I passed by, I caught faint sounds, like a low radio just beyond hearing, though not loud enough to make out words. I asked Frank if he had spoken with Mr. Madison. "Guy comes down once every night, asks for coffee. That's all," Frank said, dropping ashes into a paper tray. Strange but harmless. Harmless wasn't how I'd describe it. Every time I neared 207, my skin prickled, and the air felt unnaturally cold. Eventually, I began skipping the room on my rounds. Then came day 32. The do not disturb sign had vanished. In my slot, Frank had left a note. 207 checked out overnight. Key left on counter, cleaned thoroughly. I lingered outside the door for a long time, staring, before I finally reached for the handle. Inside, the curtains were drawn tight, making the room unnervingly dark. The stench hit instantly, sharp and metallic like spoiled meat. I froze. The place was wrecked. The sheets stripped, a towel stained and tossed on the floor, the chair knocked over, dresser drawers pulled open and scattered. What struck me most was the cold. It felt like stepping into a freezer. My breath clouded in the air, though the AC was off. I crept toward the bathroom, clutching the air freshener as if it might shield me. The door groaned open, revealing everything spotless except the mirror. Across the glass, brownish streaks smeared in frantic swipes, forming a message in uneven letters. "I am not the only one." My pulse quickened. The toilet lid stood open, and inside floated a single black glove, bloated and soaked. No blood, no body, just that glove and that phrase. I shouted for Frank. He stormed upstairs, cursing. But when he entered, his voice faltered. "Call the police," he whispered. The police arrived. So did the lodge owner. Maple Grove Inn was instantly declared a crime scene. The credit card Madison had used was stolen. The name didn't exist in any system. No ID, no license plate record. The Lincoln was gone, vanished entirely. The most horrifying part came 2 weeks later when a woman's body was discovered in a shallow grave just half a mile into the woods behind the inn. She had been missing for over a month, a waitress from Delaware. Her hair had been cut away completely, her wrists bound with black tape. The glove, the same brand, was found at the site. Authorities never confirmed if Madison was responsible. No prints, no sightings, nothing. It was as if he had erased himself completely. I quit the following morning. Told Frank I was finished. He didn't argue. He left a month later, and the inn closed down for renovations that never actually took place. I left Virginia, moved in with my cousin in North Carolina, and tried to bury the memory. But some nights, when the wind cuts through the trees, I swear I hear the door of that lodge creak open again. I feel the icy air that clung to room 207. I smell the metallic rot, and in dreams, I see that mirror once more. The words carved in panic. I am not the only one. A warning, or maybe a confession. Whatever it meant, I carry it still. I walked away, but part of me never left that room, caught there like a shadow with no name. I hadn't planned on stopping at a motel that night. If everything had gone the way it should have, I would have been home by 10:30, maybe 11 at the latest. But I ended up covering a last-minute shift at the shipping yard after one of the guys pulled a tendon in his leg. By the time I clocked out, I was already struggling to keep my eyes open behind the wheel. I knew better than to chance the long drive back to Fairmont in that condition. My vision blurred. My hands felt heavy and sore from gripping the steering wheel for too long. What I needed most was a bed. Any bed. It was late September 2022. I'd been working temporary contracts scattered across rural Northern California, moving between distribution jobs in small towns around Rensselaer County. That week I was lodging in Ridgevale with a stranger I'd found on Craigslist, who rented out half his camper for $60 a night. The place had unsettled me from the start, especially after spotting what I was pretty sure were rodent droppings inside the microwave. So that night, bone-tired and only wanting to rest somewhere without worrying about waking up to fleas or vermin bites, I pulled up Google Maps and searched for motels nearby. Only one appeared within 15 miles, Timberline Pines Motel. The name stuck out because it sounded oddly upscale for the area. I tapped the listing. No website, no reviews, just a phone number pinned to a stretch of Route 146 outside a town called Graydon. I called, and a man answered. He sounded older, maybe mid-60s. His tone wasn't exactly unfriendly, but there was no warmth in it either. He said they had a vacancy, told me to come by. Room 7 was available, and they didn't fuss much about check-in paperwork. That should have been a warning sign, but exhaustion had dulled my judgment. I told him I'd be there in about 25 minutes. It was 12:40 a.m. when I pulled off the highway and followed a gravel drive winding into a cluster of tall pines. The air shifted as I drove deeper in, cooler, heavier somehow. I shut off the radio and rolled the window down slightly. The only sounds were gravel crunching under the tires and the distant cry of some animal I couldn't identify. The Timberline Pines Motel appeared like a leftover relic from another era. A single L-shaped row of maybe 8 rooms. The siding was sun-faded beige. Some numbers above the doors were cracked or missing. A tiny wooden office cabin stood out front with a flickering yellow porch bulb. There were no other cars, no window lights. The whole place looked deserted. Still, I parked. Before I stepped out, the office door creaked open and a man walked out. He was tall, maybe 6'2", rail-thin, with long gray hair tied back loosely. He wore a heavy flannel shirt, though the night was still warm. His face was angular, weathered, carved with lines that suggested years in the sun but without joy. "You the caller?" he asked as he approached. "Yeah," I said. "Just need a room for the night. Quick stay." He didn't reply right away, only studied me for a moment before gesturing toward the office. "Room 7's yours," he said. "Cash or card?" "Card." He slid out an old reader, the type that's still plugged into a phone line. I handed him my card and ID, though he hardly glanced at them before swiping and giving me a brass key attached to a worn leather fob. "Extra towels in the closet. No room service. Try not to wander the grounds too much. Woods get thick out here." His words felt less like advice and more like a rule. Room 7 sat at the far end of the row. The exterior bulb was burned out, so I used my phone flashlight to guide the key into the knob. The interior wasn't filthy, but it wasn't clean either. The walls were painted a sickly green. The bed carried a stiff floral quilt that felt decades old. A box TV sat on the dresser but didn't work. Neither did the wall heater, though I didn't care. I tossed my bag on a chair, set my alarm for 6, and collapsed fully dressed on top of the covers. I didn't even bother pulling them back. Maybe an hour passed before something woke me. A knock. Not loud, just 2 soft taps, deliberate, at the door. I sat up, listening. Another knock followed, faint but sharper, impatient. I checked my phone. 2:07 a.m. I didn't move. I waited for a voice, for footsteps, for anything. Instead came a third knock, then silence. Slowly, I crept to the window and pulled the curtain just enough to peek. No one stood outside. The lot remained empty. The forest loomed behind it like a solid black wall. Then I caught it. Movement, low to the ground, just at the edge of the porch light's glow near the office. Something crawling. I blinked, and it was gone. Sleep never came back. I sat on the bed's edge, gripping my keys in one hand and a rusted nightstand lamp in the other, staring at the door until the sky began to pale. Just before dawn, another sound reached me, a door creaking open. I froze. Footsteps followed. Bare, unhurried, I cracked my door open just enough to see. A woman emerged from room 3. She looked mid-40s, barefoot, draped in a long nightgown. She moved slowly across the lot, eyes fixed straight ahead, unblinking, her gait heavy like she was wading through water. "Ma'am," I whispered. She gave no sign she'd heard me. Without pause, she drifted past and disappeared into the trees. I stood frozen before rushing to the office. The door was locked. I pounded on it, no response. I pulled my phone to dial 911. No signal, not a single bar. When I turned back, the old man stood at the tree line, barefoot as well, staring at me. I shouted, "The woman from room 3. She went into the woods. She looked out of it. Do you know her?" He didn't answer. He only curled his lips in the faintest smile before heading back to the office. That was it for me. I bolted, drove nonstop until I reached a gas station in Yarrow and finally had service. I searched Timberline Pines Motel. It took digging, but I uncovered an old article from 2006. The place had been shut down years earlier, after several strange incidents. Guests disappearing, locals reporting eerie sounds from the forest. One body had even been uncovered, shallowly buried behind room 3. It reopened in 2020, supposedly under different ownership. No record of who actually runs it now. None of it added up. The woman, the man, that place. Why would anyone bring it back, unless keeping it alive was the whole purpose? I was 25 when I landed a job at a roadside motel off Highway 41, about half an hour outside a town called Hollow Creek. The year before had been brutal. Losing my job, ending a long relationship that had stretched 4 years, and barely surviving off small editing projects that no longer covered my bills. With my city lease running out and savings non-existent, I packed what little I had and moved into the cheapest option I could find, a shabby studio in a town most drivers sped past without noticing. Rent was low, the area was quiet, and I told myself I just needed breathing room. My parents weren't thrilled, especially my mother. She pleaded with me to stay with them, but I needed independence. I needed to prove to myself that I could rebuild on my own. That's when I stumbled across a posting for a night clerk at the Ashwood Inn. It popped up on a forgotten classifieds page I didn't even recall saving. No prior experience required, just reliability, comfort with night hours, and the ability to handle being alone most of the time. I had no other options. I dialed the number expecting voicemail, but a man picked up. He introduced himself as Victor. He sounded almost unnervingly eager to fill the position, and asked me to stop by later that same day. The Ashwood Inn sat behind a line of pines along a bend in the highway. Its single-story structure stretched into a row of 10 rooms, paint flaking off and a battered neon sign flickering faintly even under the sun. Instead of a lobby, there was just one cramped office built into the wall beside room 1. Victor met me at the door. He looked late 50s, heavy-shouldered, hair thinning in uneven gray tufts. His button-down streaked permanently with sweat. His handshake was coarse, his smile lingering a moment longer than it should have. "You're Sam, right?" he asked. "Samantha," I corrected softly. "But Sam is fine." His grin deepened. "Sam, you're exactly what I needed." He said it with conviction, though the way his eyes lingered made my gut knot. I swallowed the feeling because I needed work. The tour was brief, 5 minutes at most. He showed me the tiny office, the battered desk with its old-fashioned guest ledger, the wall of keys locked behind glass, the stained coffee machine, and the storage closet packed with towels and cleaning supplies. Above the desk sat a small TV playing grainy security feeds. "You won't have to worry much. Hardly any guests here," Victor said. Shifts were from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., 4 nights a week, $16 an hour cash, free coffee and microwave meals. My duties: check in anyone who arrived, answer calls and keep things quiet. There was even a cot in the office for naps during slow hours. But when he added, "Most of the time you'll be completely alone," a chill slid through me. Still, I nodded. I reminded myself that after the year I'd had, it was normal to feel uneasy. I convinced myself this was temporary. I started 2 nights later. My first shift felt uneventful, silent, dragging on. Only 2 rooms were occupied. I kept the office light burning, brewed coffee I didn't touch, and watched the black and white security monitors. The feeds showed the front lot, the hall outside rooms 1 to 5, and a blurry view of the back fence. No coverage for rooms 6 through 10. I didn't question it at the time. To kill time, I read an old paperback tucked in the desk drawer and flipped through the guest ledger. Most names were one-night stays, cash only, scrawled in mismatched handwriting. None listed phone numbers or IDs, which I thought odd. Every motel I'd ever stayed at asked for ID. I brushed it off as small-town casualness. Around 2:30 a.m. something happened. I was flipping pages when I heard the sharp sound of the front door clicking open. I looked up. No one was there. The door hadn't blown wide as if caught by wind. Instead, it had shifted slightly as though someone had tested it. I stepped outside, scanning the lot. Nothing. The air was thick, damp, the only sound the buzzing of crickets and cicadas in the trees. I shut the door and locked it this time. A few minutes later, static rolled across the hallway feed. When the image cleared, room 3's door was ajar. I checked the log. Room 3 hadn't been rented for over a week. I stared at the screen as the door creaked further open, a fraction more, exposing a sliver of black inside. I froze. The phone shrilled, making me jump. I snatched it up. Ashwood Inn, Sam speaking. The line carried only heavy breathing at first. Then a rasping male voice whispered, "You don't belong here." The call cut. I stood stiff, receiver still in hand. On the monitor, room 3's door was shut again. I don't know why I didn't call the cops. I kept insisting it was some prank, maybe local kids trying to scare the newcomer. The following night, Victor stopped by before my shift. "Any issues?" he asked, his grin fixed the same way as before. I hesitated. "Not really. Just room 3's door swinging open. Might want to check the lock." His smile didn't falter. "That room's sealed. Hasn't been touched in years." I opened my mouth, but he cut me off. "Don't concern yourself with room 3. Just stay in the office. You'll be fine." At around 3 a.m. that shift, I heard footsteps crunching on gravel outside the office. I peered through the glass. Nothing. But on the monitor, I saw movement in the back lot, a tall, thin figure dragging something heavy across the ground. The image glitched, scrambled, then went black. When it flicked back, the lot was empty. I hurried to grab the keys from the closet, wanting to check the back door. But the keys for room 3 were missing. I hadn't seen anyone enter. Someone had been inside. I pushed through the rest of the shift without sleeping. When Victor returned, I unloaded everything. The strange call, the door, the footsteps, the figure. I even asked if the motel had a history of crimes or accidents. He stared, lips bent into the same immovable grin. "I had a feeling you'd scare easy," he said. I straightened. "I'm not." "Then prove it. Make it through the week." The fourth night was my breaking point. At 1 a.m., someone knocked on the office door. Slow, steady. 5 times. Not the bell, a knock. I peeked through the glass. A man stood there. His face pale, eyes hollow, collar stained red. I stumbled back, grabbed the phone and dialed 911. The line wouldn't connect. I looked again, the man had vanished. But on the hallway feed, he appeared outside room 3. Stepping through its door now swung wide. I bolted. I didn't even take my belongings. I jumped in my car and didn't stop until I reached my parents' house. The police checked the motel the following day. They found my wallet and backpack stuffed in the dumpster out back. Victor told them I'd quit without warning, that I wasn't built for night shifts. Room 3 was found locked from the inside. No trace of the man. Stranger still, all the security tapes after midnight were erased. I never collected pay, but I didn't care. 3 months later, I heard the Ashwood Inn shut down. Rumors spread. Squatters, a missing traveler, a smell coming from room 3. I never returned. I never worked nights again.